Welcome back to another Tar Heel Illustrated podcast. You're probably watching this on our rapidly growing YouTube channel. That's Tar Heel Illustrated. But remember, you can also catch us on Twitter at Heel Illustrated, on Facebook at Tar Heel Illustrated, and my favorite website, tarheelillustrated.com. You can go there for only $8.33 a month. I'm THI staff writer Brandon P. Joining me today is the publisher of Tar Heel Illustrated, is Mr. Andrew Jones. And AJ, we're here today dropping another daily podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the offensive transfers that North Carolina received in from the portal. You know, the portal is an interesting thing because, you know, there's a time where only a select few programs could reload. You know, there's the Alabamas, the Georgias. They lose a key part of their team, and they can just reload next year with recruiting. With the transfer portal, now teams like North Carolina, they can reload, and I think they've done that. So the first, we're just gonna run through each guy, AJ, and I just want to get your thoughts on each one. All right. So the first
guy, they could improve. They could not just reload, Brandon. They could improve.
True, and I think
we're doing offense here, but if you look at both offense, defense, I think Carolina got better. What they lost and what they brought in, I thought it was an upgrade in that swap because what's fair game now is coaches can encourage kids to leave in a variety of ways. They can nudge them out. I'm not saying that's what Mac Brown did, but I don't think anybody was tugging at any pant legs when those kids left. So I do think North Carolina got better on both sides of the ball versus what they lost into the portal.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of stuff they lost, this is, you know, they lost some players to the portal. They lost a couple players to the NFL draft. So Josh Downs was obviously the biggest loss they had last season, and they replaced him with Nate McCollum, a Georgia Tech transfer. He was injured in the game that UNC played when Georgia Tech played UNC last year, but he had 3 100-yard games leading up to that point. So I'm sure the UNC staff was very happy for him to not be on the field. So when you see Nate McCollum, you've had a couple of chances to see him, AJ. When you see Nate McCollum, how do you see him helping the Tar Heels out next year?
Well, he's a slot like Josh was, and he could do a lot of the same things Josh did, but he can also play wide out. And that's what I really like about bringing in a guy like McCollum as your slot, because you already have Kobe Pesor, who's a slot, but Kobe worked a lot this spring also at wide out. So they want to be able to play their best guys out there. And if your 2 of your 3 best receivers are slot first guys, well, one of them's got to learn how to play another spot out there. And that's what they've done. They've done a lot of cross-training there so they can put both on the field at the same time. McCollum is a guy that can run routes. He's a quick route runner. He's a darting route runner. And he's a very athletic guy. You would think, all slots are athletic, but he made a catch in the spring game for a touchdown on a ball that Drake May threw behind him. It was behind him and low. And he's able to reach back and keep it from hitting the turf. Jacob was right behind it in the end zone, got a great video of that play. And it was a very athletic play. So there's slot athlete, and then there's a notch above slot athlete. He's got a little bit of that notch above. And the bottom line is, you catch 60 passes at Georgia Tech last year with 3 different quarterbacks, none of whom are going to start a lot of places. That tells me something. And he missed one game. He missed a game against one of the worst pass defenses in the country. So imagine what kind of stats he could have racked up against Carolina last year. And he didn't play in that game. So I know that didn't sound very good, but it's true, right? So I think Nate McCollum's a really good pickup. And what makes him a better pickup is the next guy I'm sure we're going to talk about is how he complements Tez Walker and how Tez Walker complements him. They filled 2 needs. Now, I'm not saying they upgraded with those 2 over Josh Downs and Antoine Green. That wouldn't be fair. My saying they upgraded in the portal is if you were to give the aggregate value of the guys that went into the portal versus the aggregate value of the guys that came in from the portal, I think Carolina upgraded. I will say, though, Nate McCollum can be very, very good. He'll catch 60 passes for North Carolina this year at least, just like he did at Georgia Tech last year.
Yeah, for sure. And another thing is, you know, Mac Brown always says he wants to make special teams special again. And Nate McCollum is a guy who showed he can return punts, kind of change the field positions for North Carolina. And if you can get a couple of good punt returns from a guy like that and set up Drake May with optimal field position, you know, that would just be just make their offense even better. But
It's an older guy. He's an older. That's a talented room, but it was a young room.
yeah,
If they didn't bring anybody from the portal, you're looking at Kobe Paysor being the most experienced guy there. You're looking at JJ Jones, who missed a spring because he started last year, but he still missed a spring. You're looking at Gavin Blackwell's got a couple of catches, and then what else? So I think that bringing them in was an absolute necessity. They reached out to both players within a few hours after they entered the portal, and they're bringing in guys who have been there, done that, dudes who are older, know what they want, and they came right in, and both were getting an extra work thrown with Drake May by their second day. And it's been like that ever since. And Drake has developed tremendous chemistry with both players. And when he throws with them a lot, he throws with both of them simultaneously. So they're learning to run routes together a lot, and they're feeling each other's presence out there. So I think that everything that you can say about Nate McCollum since he arrived is nothing but positive.
Yeah, and when you say both, obviously the other person you're talking about is
Yeah.
Tez Walker. And I just have a really quick question for you, AJ. I think in one of our other podcasts, I said I think Tez Walker is the most physically talented receiver Carolina has had since Mac Brown has come back to Chapel Hill in his second stint. Is that a crazy statement?
Yeah, because he hasn't played a game at North Carolina, but talent, you can see talent before he plays a game.
Yeah, yeah.
He oozes talent. Now, I think Andre Green may have the most high-end potential, but he's still trying to match everything with his potential. Tez Walker's already done that. Like, Tez came in, he's like, guys, I had 140, 150 against Georgia. He had a 47-yard touchdown pass in the first quarter, I think, against Washington, at Washington. He knows he's a dude. Yeah. And his mind, for a guy like that to excel the way he did it at Kent State, he already had to have all those things in sync. So now he brings that to Chapel Hill, chomp at the bit to show that he could do it every week on a bigger stage. So he's already there. I do think Andre one day could be there, and I know he made a lot of progress in the spring, but he was trying to connect those things. Tez has already done it. So would it surprise me if he ends up maybe being the most dynamic big play receiver of Mac Brown's first 5 years? Obviously, this would be the fifth year. No, it wouldn't surprise me. I would not project it simply because we haven't seen it yet. But I think that it can happen. And if it does, I will bow to you and give you all plaudits next November, December, because I can envision it happening. I think if there are any guarantees with the transfer portal that Carolina got, I think at the top of the list is Tez Walker is going to be damn good. I think second we'll do the defensive guys at another time. I think Elijah Huzzie is going to be damn good at corner. So I think they picked up a star on both sides of the ball, and I think Walker is the star on the offensive side of the ball that they picked up. And that's saying that McCollum's really good. I think Walker's got more star potential.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Tez Walker, you mentioned the game against Georgia. You have to think he did it against some high level competition in a situation where he was clearly the number one. I mean, he's probably the number one option on most teams he plays on, but he's clearly the number one option. So a team like Georgia is keying in on him. He's on the scouting. He's number one on the scouting report, and he still burns them for over 100 yards. So
well, let's look at it this way. Georgia didn't give up a touchdown in the first 3 games. He scored the first offensive touchdown against Georgia last year, and it was in the second quarter. And it cut the score to 14-12. They actually hung around with Georgia. They only lost like 35-22 or something. They hung around. So he wasn't catching passes racking up yards when they're down 40. It was a competitive game way into the fourth quarter. He was racking up yards when they're hell-bent on stopping him. And they couldn't.
Well, AJ, another area where we've talked countless times about that North Carolina has to fortify for them to take the next level to be in the program where they want to be is along the offensive line. They went out, they got Willie Lampkin from Coastal Carolina. He was a Sun Belt Conference Offensive Lineman of the Year. Mac Brown has talked a lot about how tough he is. He's undersized. So they said Mac Brown did say that. He said the only concern they had about him was his size, but when they met him, they offered him on the spot. He accepted on the spot. Mac Brown said it was an easy recruitment. So in talk about how they need to get tougher on both lines of the scrimmage, you have to think they did get tougher with Willie Lampkin, right?
Well, Max said one of the things that stuck out right away was the handshake.
Yeah.
It was a great handshake. And think about how many hands Mac Brown's shaken in his life. He's the quintessential handshaker.
Yeah.
I mean, Mac will shake a couple hundred hands a day, not think twice about it. But Willie Lampkin stood out. So that's one thing. Another is that Max said, and I'm going to paraphrase, but this is fairly close to accurate. He said that Willie Lampkin, what he lacks in size, he makes up for in toughness. He's a road grader. And I asked Willie during an interview back in the spring, I asked him about that term. I said, would you agree with that? And he doesn't, I don't think he likes to boast about himself. Most offensive linemen don't. They're not showy in that sense. But he said, he thought about it. He said, yeah, I think so. I think that's right. So he's probably envisioning dudes that he's driven into the earth multiple times. And that's what a road grader does. And he's got that. He's an advantage he has being low is that he's already got low pad level.
Yeah.
And he's super strong. And he was a wrestler in high school. He was 47-0 as a wrestler in high school, won a state championship in Georgia, and then as a senior, finished second his junior year. He probably would have been recruited at places like Georgia had he been 6'2", 6'3", but he's not. So he's learned to make the most of it. It gives him a little bit of a chip, his height. He doesn't like talking about it a whole lot, but he will because he's a fairly gracious guy. But also with us, it was new for us. So we were learning about his thoughts about the height. But he says he uses it to his strength. He knows that when he goes up to the line of scrimmage, the first snap of a game, the opposing defensive lineman probably looks at him and says, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
But then he's into him. He's off the snap and he's into him, and he's a nuisance to a lot of defensive linemen. So, and by the way, he had that at Coastal. He was a center. He started at guard for 2 years, at center for one, and he didn't work out at center much at all in the spring because he fractured a couple fingers in his hand, his snapping hand, his right hand, and he couldn't snap. But Max said he tried to get him to come out and get it attended to. He's like, no, he refused to come off the field. So there is a big time toughness there. There's a smarts there. When you're Sunbelt's not a bad league. When you're Sunbelt Conference Offensive Lineman of the Year, that means that you're a big time player. So that's three starters they added to the portal on offense. And there two were absolute areas of need because of what they lost. And the other one was an area that they simply needed not just get better, but they need to be tougher. Carolina's offensive line needs to be tougher. And I think Willie Lampkin brings in an attitude and a toughness and a chip that group needs.
Yeah, I think another area of Willie Lampkin's game that goes underappreciated is how well he can move his feet. A lot of offensive linemen, when they're at the point of attack and let's say the running back is running towards them, they have good position, they have good hand position, everything is good. But then once the running back runs past them and the defensive player turns and he starts chasing the running back and they're still in the same position, then they get called for a hold. And that actually happened to Eli Sutton in the spring game.
Yeah, it did.
Spring game. But Willie Lampkin can move his feet, so when the guy turns and runs, he can mirror him all the way down the field. I noticed that in this film. He can mirror the guy all the way down the field, stay in good position, and avoid some of those holding calls. So I just think, if you can avoid hold calls, those -10 penalties, that's huge. He's an older guy, smart guy. So I do think he will ultimately help the line of scrimmage, even though some people are a little down on his size. I think ultimately he will be a net positive for UNC's offensive line.
Yeah, also with the footwork, as you well know, being a former offensive lineman, you've got to have good footwork to turn a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
So if the ball carrier is coming through your hole, and they still do have design runs through holes, if you need to turn your hips and turn the lineman a little bit, your feet have to be working properly. It begins there. And then it's your hips and your strength, your balance. And you know where he gets a lot of that from? Wrestling. Yeah. He gets a lot of the footwork and a lot of the balance from wrestling. And that's, he's really understands his low center of gravity, and he learned that in wrestling, and he applies that to the football field. And he says that it constantly helps him on the football field.
Yeah. And when all the fans out there, when you go to a football game, you're watching the team warm up, and you just see a guy along the offensive line that doesn't look like he belongs there. Just remember, he is there for a reason. He's not. Yeah, it's not a charity case, I promise you. So,
No. He's not gonna like, if he hears this, he's not gonna like you saying that. He's gonna like half of what you said. No,
I-
but I think he really appreciates the fact that when people know what he's all about, they get it. And it didn't take long to know what he was all about. And you and I sat at the second open practice that we went to, and we sat together and watched him for a while. And we both marveled at the footwork.
Mhm.
And we marveled at how quick he is. And he just owns a low space there, which gives him advantage every time he fires off the ball.
Yep, he certainly does. But AJ, I think that's a good place to stop. Those are the 3 offensive transfers that will be coming to North Carolina. I think North Carolina has brought in 3 starters that are going to play for the Tar Heels next season.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I agree with you. I think the transfer portal overall is a net positive from what they lost in the transfer portal to what they gained in the transfer portal. But for TarHeelIllustrated.com, I'm Brandon P. He's been Andrew Jones. Thank you for watching.